Hello students, myself Dr. Mahesh Pentewar, Department of Zoology, ग्रामीण ACS महाविद्यालय वसंतनगर कोडगाळ, तालुका मुखेड, district Nanded. Students, today we discussed about the components of an ecology. The structure of any ecosystem is formed by two components, namely abiotic components and biotic components. That means ecology is divided into two different components, that is a abiotic component and biotic components. Abiotic components is a non-living things and biotic components is a living things. In abiotic components, air, water, soil and different types of minerals are included, and in biotic components there were producers, consumers and decomposers. The consumers are divided into again three types: primary consumer, secondary consumer and tertiary consumer. You see in this figure, that is a producers, that means plants. It takes the energy from the sunlight. All the producers are the plants. Then consumers, in it primary consumer, secondary consumer and tertiary consumers. They were herbivorous or carnivorous. Then decomposers, in it bacteria, fungus are present. That means they decompose the body of the dead organisms and then it produce to the abiotic components like carbon dioxide, oxygen, nitrogen, minerals, etc. The structure of any ecosystem is formed of two components, namely abiotic components and biotic components, which you see in this figure. Sun, forest, man-injured desert ecosystem, nutrients, all of these are non-living things, and these non-living things is essential for living things. Green plants, herbivorous, parasites, saprophytes, that means it is depending on a dead organic matter, that is a decomposers, carnivorous, freshwater, marine water ecosystem. These are the outline diagram of this any type of the ecosystem. So we see in the ecosystem there were two components, one is a abiotic component and another is a biotic component. So what is meant by abiotic components? The biotic components of an ecosystem includes the non-living substances of the ecosystem. For example, water, oil, light, temperature, minerals, climate pressure, etc. The biotic factors of an ecosystem depending on the abiotic factors for their survivals. You see in this figure, wind, sunlight, soil, temperature, atmosphere, water, these are the abiotic factors. These are the non-living components of an ecosystem. The another system or another components or another factors is a biotic components or biotic factors. The biotic factors include the living organisms. That means those the organisms which are live. जिवंतपणाचं लक्षण असलेले सर्व प्राणी वनस्पती यामध्ये आपणास सापडतील. लिव्हिंग ऑर्गॅनिझम्स of the environment, for example plants, animals, bacteria, viruses, etc. That means all these organisms, plants, bacteria, viruses are live. The biotic factors of an ecosystem are classified into three main and important groups, namely producers, consumers and decomposers. You see in this figure at the bottom decomposers were present, then producers, that means green plants, and green plants eaten by a cow and a deer, which is a herbivorous, and the herbivorous are eaten by a carnivorous, that is you see in this figure tiger. So what is meant by producers? The organism which carry out photosynthesis constitute of producers of an ecosystem. In ecosystem, producers are main important ecosystem because they are autotrophs. Autotroph means they nourish itself. स्वतःचं अन्न स्वतः तयार करतात, अशांना ॲटोट्रॉप्स असं म्हणतात. दॅट मीन्स द ऑर्गॅनिझम्स विच कॅरी आउट फोटोसिंथेसिस फ्रॉम द सनलाइट constitute of producers of an ecosystem. For example, all the plants, algae and bacteria. The producers depend upon abiotic factors. That means all the producers are dependent on abiotic factors. Without abiotic factors, producers do not grow. ऊन, वारा, पाऊस, लाईट जर नसेल तर कुठलाही प्रोड्युसर्सची वाढ होणार नाही व इकोसिस्टम ती कंप्लीट होणार नाही. द प्रोड्युसर्स डिपेंड अपॉन अबायोटिक फॅक्टर्स ऑफ एन इकोसिस्टम फॉर प्रोड्युसिंग एनर्जी. दे आर प्रोवाइडेड विथ अ chlorophyll. So new word here you saw, chlorophyll. Chlorophyll is used in the synthesis of energy. आपण जेव्हा अन्न खातो त्यावेळी आपल्या शरीरातील प्रत्येक पेशींना ते अन्न पुरवठा केलं जातं आणि आपल्या शरीरामध्ये ताकद आल्यासारखे वाटते. म्हणजे अन्न घेतल्यानंतर आपल्या शरीरामध्ये ताकद येते. ताकद म्हणजे एनर्जी येते आणि ते प्लांट्समध्ये एनर्जी मिळवण्याचं काम फोटोसिंथेसिसच्या माध्यमातून केलं जातं. पाणी आणि सूर्यप्रकाश यामधून प्रत्येक वनस्पती आपलं अन्न स्वतः तयार करतात. दॅट मीन्स द क्लोरोफिल इज यूज्ड इन द सिंथेसिस ऑफ एनर्जी रिच कंपाउंड विथ युटिलायझेशन ऑफ अबायोटिक like light, carbon dioxide, water and minerals. A portion of energy synthesized is used by producers for their growth and survival. The remaining energy is used for a further use. Then we see about a second biotic components, that is a consumers. Consumers are organisms which eat other organisms. The consumers are further divided into three types. They are primary consumers, secondary consumers, tertiary consumers. We see the figure: insects, lizard, birds, deer and a Bengali tiger. Insects depending on producers, lizard on insects and the tiger is carnivorous. That means it feed on other organisms. Then we see the firstly primary consumers. So what is mean by primary consumers? The primary consumers eat the producers like plants, algae and bacteria. The primary consumers are also called as herbivores. For example, rabbit, deer, etc. are primary consumers in a terrestrial ecosystem. So we know about the primary consumers because the primary consumers taken their food only a herbivorous, घास फूस खाने वाले म्हणजे गवतावरती जिवंत राहणारे, भाजीपाला खाणारे असे सर्व प्राणी हे प्रायमरी कंझ्युमर्स असतात. उदाहरणार्थ ससा असेल, हरिण असेल, ग्रॉसहॉपर असेल. सो आफ्टर दॅट वी स्टडी अबाउट द secondary consumers. That means it take the food from the primary consumers. So secondary consumers eat the herbivores because the primary consumers eat only a grass. That means it is a herbivorous, but secondary consumers are eaten to the primary consumers. So it is a primary carnivorous organisms also. Secondary consumers eat the herbivores, so they are called as primary carnivorous. They are specially called as primary carnivorous. For example, fox, wolf, etc. are the consumers in our terrestrial ecosystem. So lastly, we see about the tertiary consumers. So what is meant by tertiary consumers? In tertiary consumers, the large organisms kill the small organisms and eaten. The kill and eat the secondary consumers, they are also called as a secondary carnivorous. For example, lion and tiger, which we will see in the above figure. Last type of the components, biotic components, that is a decomposers, or it is also called as reducers. The decomposers are organisms that break up dead bodies of the plants and their waste products. They include fungi and certain bacteria. They secrete enzymes. The enzyme digest the food organisms and the debris into smaller molecules. These molecules is absorbed by the decomposers. After taking energy, the producers releases molecules to the environment as a chemicals to be used again by the producers. Some examples given below, that is a worm, earthworm, it is a decomposer, mushrooms, insects also are decomposers, bacteria, viruses, molds, etc. are the decomposers. So today we see the detail of the components of an ecosystem, of a terrestrial ecosystem. Firstly, the two types of components, that is a abiotic components and biotic components. Abiotic is a non-living things and biotic is a living things. In biotic components, there were three types: producers, consumers and decomposers. Producers, consumers and decomposers. Consumers again divided into three types, that is a primary consumer, secondary consumer and tertiary consumer. And lastly, the decomposers, which is depending on a dead organic matter. So, thank you students. Thank you very much. See you in next period.